This van is already prepared with a cutout, and you do that in a way you are doing it also for other products in the market. You are following the window line. That's actually where we cut out. In our case, we have 170 installed, so the cutout is a little smaller. On 144, it moves a little forward. That is all similar. We decided to paint the part between the front window and our side sleeper pod in black. Both of the side sleeper pods are prepared back from the painter, and I always like to protect the edges a little bit in case adhesive squeezes out. So I did a little bit of a line taping and then I doubled it up with a slightly wider one. The goal is, and that is maybe important, there is a couple of reinforcements here. That's why we can put a screw in. And you also see we have a little bit of space that the screw is not going out. So if we are staying here in the safe spot, it's actually no problem to screw it on. Both sides are nicely finished. So that is actually why we can install it the way we are showing it today. So to prepare for the installation, I would recommend that you find these little raised spots. There are lower valleys and then these raised spots. If the screw is positioned relatively far to the back and then in the higher part of that, then you are finding exactly the spot in the frame of the side sleeper pod to hold it in position. We do that in all four corners we have, and that pulls the flare in quite nicely and you don't need to worry about gaps. Later you could also remove the screw after it's cured and you could fill the gap with a little Sika, but also the screw wouldn't harm there. So we start in drilling the holes. I chose a very short screw. It's number 6.5. We found out that in one corner there's like a doubling in the material from Mercedes. We decided for a 3/4. But this is, I think, the ideal length. For me, it is, I like to stay as far to the outside as possible. So here's a raised spot, and I'm actually drilling here in the upper part through the material. It's double layer. Make sure that you do a little bit of rust protection as well. For me, it's important that you double check the lengths of the screws. Not every van is similar. We have seen some differences how far they are apart, so it might be that you need a longer screw. So that is a little bit at your view first when you do the dry fit, which screw is fitting the best. You need obviously a little bit of material going into the frame, but you definitely also don't want to go to the outside. So we try it first, we do the dry fit with the shorter screws, and we can always exchange it with one size longer. We proceed with that process on all four corners. Also here, I'm looking a little bit where is the last spot, where does it make sense to put the screw in, and then basically we drill the hole. And the same here, here's a high spot. I don't go all the way up. I try to stay as close to the cutout as possible. And the last corner, there's no raised spot, but I try to stay in the same distance. So here's a little knob, a little flange. to take the friction away that the screw needs to work through two materials and that it's not really pushing it together, I actually use a slightly larger drill bit and go to the outside and widen up the outer hole. That gives freedom for the screw to just go into the fiberglass material. I always recommend to take the sharp edges away. It's also easier for you to apply the rust protection, so just make sure that you have a nice, smooth drill hole. The next step, after you cleaned everything up, put your rust protection on, is that you are carefully screwing in the first set screw. And again, it might vary a little bit from the length. We can now just barely let it go out, and you can see already when you go all the way in that you have a chance to dry fit. We want a little bit of a hole when we dry fit the side part, that we know where the position is, so you can play a little bit how far the tip of the screw comes out. Just barely out. Please eyeball, please always check how much gap you have between the two metals. That can vary a little bit, and maybe you need a longer one, maybe the shorter one is doing the job. So try that carefully, that you are not going out too much. Here we go. So all 4 screws are slightly out. And now we need a team, maybe with 2, to carry the side part towards the van, and we give it a little bit of a pre-drill that we have the holes, and then we can work through the rest of the preparation. So the guys are helping me out for this step. The dry fitting actually is a little easier if you have some colleagues, and I can stay inside. We have the prepared holes, and while the colleagues prepare the right fit on the outside, I have enough time to give all 4 corners a little bit of a pre-drill. Perfect. So we start with the top rear corner. Obviously you can't go all the way through. It's really only to make sure that we go through the first layer of the fiberglass, and then same at the bottom rear hole. If your team member on the outside is holding it tight, makes it a little easier. Same on the front. Just make sure that you don't go to the second skin. It's a double layer fiberglass, so you have insulation in between. You don't need to worry. Don't go all the way through, just the first layer of the fiberglass. Here we go. Okay, we can take it off. So we have dry fitted the side sleeper pods with the 4 little set screws. They are holding it in place now, so you don't need to worry about any tapes right now. It's holding it, but it's not sealed and glued in. I always like to do a little extra work and tape off in case something of the adhesive squeezes out that we don't need to clean an awful lot. So I use a regular tape, what you all have in your shop, and go around the pod itself. And also to make sure that I know where I later need to scuff, I actually mark the location of the side sleeper pod as well. That helps me that I'm not damaging anything else of the van what we don't want to damage, and I do the same here in the front as well. That gives me a little bit of a peace of mind that I'm not going too far out when I'm scuffing and preparing the primer for the final glue on. Scuff the surfaces, you can use either like a little scuff pad. You can also use 240 or 180 grit sanding paper. We don't want to take the color completely away, or even worse, going down to the metal. We only want a rough surface. The primer will do the rest. And I'm basically working my way forward through it and stay at my blue tape mark, what I did before, and just scuff the shine away from the black paint, in your case the color of the van. And that's actually what we try to do. So take your time and work your way through and give it a nice scuff to have a better gluing surface ready for the adhesive. Obviously, after we scuffed everything nicely, we want to clean it to prepare for the primer. I start typically with an alcohol, and later the last run I do with acetone to really make sure everything is fat-free and we have no silicone or any other substrate on the surface that what could hinder gluing strongly. So I start with our denatured alcohol here. And I will do that at least 2 times, and then the last run with the acetone. And for the next run I also exchange the paper towel, that all the stuff we took off is not again in the next run on it again. Don't go back and forward with your towel, because a silicone or dirt can also go back and forward with your moving. So I always try to keep it in one direction as much as I can. We are also preparing the perimeter, the gluing flange of the side sleeper pod, and proceed with cleaning in the same way we did on the van. Also on the side pod side, on the flanges, we want to clean everything very thoroughly. Again, the first run with the alcohol, and then later I changed to the acetone. Also here again, don't move back and forward, always in one direction. And then you can also basically fold your towel. And for the second run I'm actually really using a new towel. For the last run we are using acetone and a completely new clean towel, and do the same process, one direction, to make sure the surfaces are really nice and clean. And the same approach for our side sleeper pods as well. To have the strongest bonding, we are using a product from Sika. The number is 252, and I prefer the black one in this case, also especially because we have the black paint, but the black version is a little more UV resistant than the white version. And the best matching primer actually is 206 GNP, so that's the recommended primer. And they deliver also a small little brush if you lose a brush, or a little cotton ball applier That is up to you. Important is it needs to be around a minute, shaking very well. You hear the little metal ball in it. We really want to hear that. And then you can apply it right away. It takes roughly 12-13 minutes to dry. And we apply on both sides, on the side sleeper part and also on the van. I think the ideal is that you don't have too much shine through. It doesn't need to be pitch black, but a good amount should be on. I always say not too shiny, that you see the original color. Cotton ball a little better than the brush, and think that you have a little more control, but that is really up to you what you prefer in your shop. I would start with the rear lower screw. It's not catching it. Yeah, but I basically pressed it away. It's not in the hole. Can you hold it tight? Here we go, it's coming. I'm going to Tom's side, low. Press it in. Okay, I'm going to Tom top. I'm going to the rear top. So the passenger side is already installed. On the driver side, we decided to install a window in our side sleeper pods. You can basically use every window you prefer. It's a super solid sandwich panel, so you don't need wood framing. to get your clamps or your window installed. We decided for our preferred window, which is the Zeiss S4 with an aftermarket exchange pane. On the outside it's real glass tinted, and on the inside it is the typical acrylic one that combines both advantages of very scratch resistant exterior, good insulation, and it comes also with a matching blind and mosquito net. So this is what we want to install. We have prepared the cutout area on fiberglass like on metal. Please always do some radius cutouts before you start. Otherwise you can get stress cracks and maybe have damages to the material. So we have already prepared the surface, and now the next step is cutting the panel out. Cutout is prepared. We cleaned the edges a little bit. I personally like to install the window later. It takes a little bit of weight out, and I can also communicate with my team on the other side a little easier. So I keep it like this and then install as the last step of the installation. So we follow the next steps like on the other side, cleaning thoroughly both sides, applying the primer, and then the actual gluing process. So our next step is cleaning both surfaces on the side sleeper pod and the van. So we finished up this installation, cleaned up everything. Obviously we are controlling that all the edges are nice and smooth, and on the inside you have the little screws to set a little harder or less to bring it into the perfect position. We also installed our window, and you see how nicely that is tinted and matches almost completely the factory window as well. The beauty is it is fully insulated. In the past you had other options for sure. Now you have a beautiful fully insulated side pod, asymmetrical, so a little further out on the driver's side, a little narrower in the sliding door, nicely shaped to fit the modern look of the Sprinter. You have also the inside already completely finished, as it is a vacuum infusion product. You have gel coat on the inside and on the outside that gives you the option to just paint, or you upholster, or you can also leave it as it is depending on your color scheme. Very easy also, if you use little riff nuts on the inside, you can put like little nets and accessory holders there. You can glue on our airline tracks with the Sealant Pro accessories to also use the additional width for some storage. So overall, a really cool product for your van. Fully insulated, super smooth surfaces on the inside and outside. You can choose different size of windows, so you're not bound into something in the mold. You can also go for a much bigger one. That's totally up to you and how it fits into your build.